place to dream, a place to soar, a place for pleasure, a place for purpose, a place to play. Whatever your speed, whatever your passion, this re-energized American playground has something for everyone. Come experience the energy and many heartbeats of unforgettable, unstoppable, unexpected Atlantic City, New Jersey.
Hello and welcome to this on-location broadcast from meetings today here at IMEX 2019, IMEX America in Las Vegas. We're talking about destination boycotts, what meeting planners need to know about this most volatile subject, and we have a great live audience with us today, so thank you guys for joining us too. I'm Tyler Davids. I'm the Vice President and Chief Content Director of Meetings Today, and we have a highly esteemed panel. I was joking with them earlier that I always surround myself with people who know more than I do, so I can sort of hide and let them do the talking about what they know about. So I'm in good company here. We have Kathy Mason, Tyra Hilliard, Eric Rosenberg, and David Kleiman. And I think I'll just go down the way and let you introduce yourselves and tell everyone what you do.
Terrific. Thank you, Tyler. My name is Kathy Mason. I'm Senior Director of Events for Young Presidents Organization. We are a global organization of CEOs and presidents worldwide, 26,000 members in over 125 countries.
Hi everybody, I'm Tyra Hilliard. I'm an attorney and a college professor at the College of Coastal Georgia. I teach hospitality law and crisis management for meetings and events there.
Hi, Eric Rosenberg. I'm with the CQTix, which is the online ticketing platform. I was working for Champions League, Ryder Cup, an institution like that, and I had my own corporate event agency in Brussels for 20 years, and now with Even Business Formula, I help independent business owners to grow their business.
And my name is David Kleiman. I'm based in Northern California. I work with DMOs and hotel companies doing research in the meetings and event and tourism space, facilitating think tanks, and I'll be the moderator for this session here. So I wanted to put some context behind where we are in these volatile times that we're in and the impact around live events and meetings. It's no secret that lawmakers in places around the United States and beyond can make laws that ultimately could have an impact on whether an organization wants to host a meeting in a destination. In the United States, there are numerous examples going back historically quite far back to Arizona and Martin Luther King Day and that state's lack of recognition of MLK Day created boycotts up to and including the NFL and other sports teams. More recently, the state of Indiana, the states of North Carolina and Texas introduced either anti-LGBTQ laws or what are known as bathroom bills that were perceived as discriminating against either transgendered or other people that created travel and meeting boycotts. This comes to the weaponization of travel. So this is a reality in our environment today. What we want to talk about in this session is how destinations are struggling and dealing with these boycotts, how meeting professionals can protect themselves, hopefully protect themselves through the proper use of contract languages, and then tips that meeting professionals can use. I want to point to and give you a tool from Destinations International. DI, as it's known, Destinations International, has just completed a weaponization of travel study. So if you either go to destinationsinternational.org or just Google destinations international weaponization of travel, you will get that study. It is in the public domain, and there are extensive tools for destinations and for meeting professionals. There are actually 2 toolkits that you can download that help meeting professionals and destinations address these issues. One of the things that we want to talk about here is the reality of how an organization can confront this issue and deal with the issue of a potential boycott. There are studies that DI, Destinations International, have published that show a real bifurcation, a real split in, and this is specific to American society, of people's support for boycotts. So when it comes to the weaponization of travel, I will not go to X destination because there are laws on the books that are perceived as fill in the blank. Around half the population supports that and half doesn't. There are trickle-down economic impacts that really are very specific to frontline workers. Housekeepers, doormen, valets, taxi drivers are really impacted when business is not taken to a destination. And that's a reality that goes into the thinking of toolkits. There are some recent examples. This morning I was talking with an Asian destination, Kuala Lumpur, that has documented 6 citywide meetings that were confirmed on their books, large citywide meetings with thousands of people that have canceled their contracts due to political statements that were made by Malaysian lawmakers and government officials around LGBTQ issues and boycott of Israel. So these are absolutely measurable impacts that are seen in destinations in our ecosystem of live events. So that kind of frames what we're going to talk about here, and I want to turn it to our panel and hear their opinions. Kathy, start with you. You're doing meetings in the United States and in global destinations as well. Can you talk about how you deal with this weaponization of travel and boycotts and what IPO does and doesn't do in this world?
Sure. At YPO, Young Presidents Organization, we are essentially nonpartisan and not committed to boycotting destinations, simply by the fact that our CEOs and members of our organization are very involved in respective events accordingly. We really haven't come across that at all. I think it's important, though, however, in a planner's perspective, that we must keep our personal and professional views separate and stay aligned with our organization's core mission, values, and culture moving through. And again, with YPO, we haven't had any experience as such.
So this is, I think, an interesting point of planners, you feel, have an obligation to keep personal opinions personal.
Correct.
And focus their professional activities aligned with their organization's culture, beliefs, ethos, strategic intent, which to me speaks to the importance of meetings meaning business and aligning with organizational goals. So do you have any experience of members or attendees aligning or uniting around political issues that get risen in the organization to affect culture, to affect the culture, and then the potential picking of a destination or moving of a meeting?
We have not experienced that to date with any of our global events, and I think, quite honestly, with our organization, it's cut off early in the process and the conversations are had behind the scenes.
Interesting.
So, yep.
Interesting. Eric, you've had, I know, experience when you ran your agency in Brussels. You're doing meetings all over the world. In preparation for this meeting, you talked about a situation in Austria. Can you give us the backstory on that and what the lessons learned were?
So we had, our client was a major Fortune 100 companies, a global company. And it was at that time that in Austria, for the first time, you had the neo-Nazi party that came into power. And to your point that you have to align with your own values, I always think that lead, follow, or get out of the way. And in my case, my values were I don't want to deal with this type of people, so I went to my client because it was my agency.
Right.
And
so you had the ability to have that conversation.
It's a choice. You always have a choice.
Yeah.
And my choice was to say, I love you guys. We've been working together for years. As far as I'm concerned, I cannot go now doing business there. So if you want to go there, in that case, I'm afraid you'll have to find another agency, which obviously have financial implications for myself and my family and everything, but that's how I was. And they finally decided to go with me to another place. Now, with the experience of that, if that would happen again today, I would probably still go to the destination and make a huge donation to organizations that are aligned with my values and bringing people together.
How large would that? No, I'm kidding. So
it was very large.
So, you know, it's interesting. So Kathy's saying keep your personal, as an association or corporate meeting professional, that you need to, your point of view is keep your personal opinions in a box and align with the organizational values. For you, being a business owner, running an agency, what we would in the United States call a third-party planning agency, you were comfortable making a decision that I don't, as the business owner, want to be aligned with a neo-Nazi government, hosting a meeting in a neo-Nazi, now government-ruled organization. You successfully were able to pivot that meeting to another destination, but I think that that's interesting that you were able to harness your personal feelings and change a customer's point of view about where they would hold a...
Sure, and trust me, I didn't make friends because I make it very vocal in our own industry, but that's always how I live, is making sure that I can look at myself in the mirror. That's one thing. The other thing is, and I recognize that, it's because it's my own company.
Right.
If I'm working for an organization, I'm representing an organization, and when I was chairman of MPI, I was representing MPI, so in no way would I take any personal stand, political, religious, whatever it was, because I was representing the organization. So thinking about Kaya, if I was in your shoes, I would definitely do the same. So it's a question of choice. Now, if you are in an organization that you're absolutely not aligned with the values, then again, going back to lead, follow, or get out of the way.
Probably want to get out of the way.
And you know, now family behind. So it's always a question of, it's not a black and white choice.
Yeah.
It's a question of values, and it's also a question of what is important for you and how you can live with your principles.
Yep. I'm going to go to a legal question here, but I also want to reference another tool for you. There is a Future Studies 2019 that was just released, also by Destinations International. So you can go to destinationsinternational.org and just look for Future Studies or just Google it. They listed about 20 key findings where they see the destination marketing world going around travel, tourism, meetings, and events. The number one top issue, and I will read it here: safety, security, climate change, and political economic realities, insert travel boycotts there, are now top considerations for choosing a destination, especially meetings. The industry is lacking risk management protocols to help stakeholders mitigate threats. So therefore, they released the toolkit for meeting planners and destinations. Tyra, I would ask you, how can meeting professionals protect themselves legally around contractual information and contractual clauses. And I will put the caveat that Tyra is going to talk about U.S. law here. We can't be expert in all 200 plus countries that have legal systems, but if you can talk from the U.S. point of view.
Sure. Well, I think the important thing with any contracts and really in anywhere is think about this before you sign the contract. Anytime this comes up after a contract is already signed, that's a problem. So if this is an issue of concern, think about it ahead of time and can think about whether this is going to be something that you want to put in the contract, and figure out what I always say put a hammer in. What's your hammer going to be? If there's an issue that comes up, if there's legislation that's passed, if there's a situation, then what? So is it going to be, we can terminate without liability, if our enrollment, if our attendance is going to drop because people are not going to come, do you waive attrition, what exactly is it? If then, what? If there's a clause that you want to put in, it could be a force majeure clause, it could be a waiver of attrition. There's a lot of different ways to handle it, but the real important thing is that you think about it up front and that you put the clause in. So there's a couple of different ways. But the other issue, I think, with putting in contract language is it can't be so broad that it's, if anything happens that offends me or my CEO or anybody on our staff, then we can do this. So I think it needs to be.
That wouldn't work, huh?
Well, I wouldn't sign it if I were a hotel or a venue of any kind. So I think the important thing is to figure out, is there a hot button issue for your organization? So if you are Planned Parenthood, and you have this one particular hot button issue that goes with your organization. A lot of organizations now have codes of ethics. So look through that. If you can say, if an issue arises that violates our code of ethics, and here it is, so you can see exactly what it is. If you can tie it to something specific, I think that helps.
Can you actually, on an example like that, have you seen where suppliers would accept something like a clause that included an organization's code of ethics?
I do have a client that actually does that they will actually share their code of ethics.
Must abide by the following.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they tie it to something specific, because I think tying it to something specific says, look, we're not just trying to look for a way out ahead of time. We have these specific issues, and theirs are specifically tied to discrimination. And so they will actually limit it to something discriminatory, but they don't limit it to just LGBT discriminatory or just race discriminatory, but theirs is, if anything violates this section of our ethics.
Yeah. So I know you said plan in advance, don't sign a contract that has fluid language, really put that hammer in. But we live in a volatile society and things happen. So is there advice that you can share on, you've signed a contract in advance and now the ecosystem has changed. Something has taken place and there is a perceived inability to execute the event in that destination because of fill in the blank. Is there anything that can be done to protect the organization?
It can be very hard, and it's so hard to give a blanket answer because, of course, it depends. It depends on the group, it depends on the destination, it depends on the situation, it depends on the facts. So it always depends. That's always my answer as a lawyer. It depends.
Good answer from a lawyer.
But I think it would depend on the certain facts. It could be that whatever has happened, frustrates the purpose of the meeting itself. That would be your best case scenario. But a lot of times what you need to do is, instead of sort of taking a legal approach to this, you take a proactive approach and you hold your meeting anyway, but you use it as a platform to do something positive towards.
To Eric's point of,
Yeah.
in retrospect, could have met in Austria and had some sort of political or charitable.
Do a CSR program or invite a speaker from the destination that may be part of the aggrieved party.
Have a debate, something
Right.
that addresses the issue.
From a legal standpoint, though, I certainly wouldn't mind being the lawyer that said, but for you passing this law or this happening, our enrollment or our attendance would not be down, and therefore we'd like forgiveness on these attrition numbers.
Yeah.
I think that's a legal argument that might be made.
And that term is frustration of purpose then?
No, that would be more of just sort of just the legal argument would be that it's inevitable. It's just sort of the naturally occurring sort of outcome. So.
Interesting. So Eric, I know you've got some strong feelings about this topic. We'd love to hear. Nothing off the table here. Let it fly.
I'm glad there's nobody in attendance and it's not recorded. So that.
Oh yeah.
No, I guess my point is coming from Belgium, and I have big issues with political correctness, and more importantly, with what I call selective indignation. And when we're talking about boycotting a destination, we're talking about the LGBTQ. I'm a strong, what people in the LGBTQ community call a strong ally, and I'm proud of it. Now, when I hear what's going on with the Dyke March in Washington, where you have two Jewish lesbians wearing the rainbow flag with the Star of David being kicked out, I would love to hear as much noise.
Indignation over that.
Indignation over
Right.
that. When I'm hearing, then should I boycott Washington? If I go, should I boycott now Minnesota and Michigan because there's two congresswomen who are openly anti-Semitic and supporting BDS and CARE and all those organizations who basically are supporting terrorists that are killing people? Should I stop doing meetings in Minnesota and Michigan? Of
So
course not.
how do you draw that line? I mean, this is really this question of in our live events world, how do you get past selective indignation and be professional and try and move the needle towards a more inclusive world and less division and all.
And reflect the values of your organization.
And exactly.
Yeah.
Correct, and that's your question about where do you draw the line?
Yeah.
And that to me is first of all the education. The topics we're talking about, the organization I mentioned, people don't have any clue what it is, and it exists and it's very powerful. So that's the first thing, is educating people. The second thing is making sure that when you are voicing your opinion and you want to start boycotting for whatever reason, then you have to be logical.
Right.
And you cannot select, if this is a topic that is important to you, you cannot select in which situation you're going to say, oh, we have to boycott another. So you have to be consistent.
Right.
And that's my point, and I think that as a human being, that's our own role, is to speak up and to making sure that people know what you're talking about. Then you link that to the topic of today, should destination be boycott? That boycott work? Yes, and.
Right.
We're becoming, you're going to be indignation for something, and you wake up in the morning and say, so what are we now offended by this morning?
Right. What
and
can
what
it
are we
be
going
today?
to be doing?
What's my topic of the day?
Just getting up in the morning sometimes.
So I would say common sense.
Yeah.
I would say being consistent. I would say educate people and speak about that. And at the end of the day, no more selective indignation, but that's victory.
Yeah. So Kathy, talk about within your organization, your role as a strategic meeting advisor to senior management. And are you having the discussions of we're operating in a divisive global world, and how do we protect the organization, and how do we proactively preempt or keep our focus on what the ethos of the organization should be focused on. Are you having these conversations around the weaponization of travel, or is that not on the radar screen in the C-suite?
It's not on the radar in the C-suite because the C-suite, our members are talking to each other and figuring it out.
Okay.
I think is the best way of explaining it. However, putting it back on my responsibility, it's also my responsibility as the meeting professional to look at any destination strategically for a potential issue. Now, for example, we had our annual Global Leadership Conference, which is our largest event in Dubai. 3 years ago, and this has nothing to do with boycotting, but this is a good example of how our members work together, and we have a very large contingent from Israel. So what we did for them to come into Dubai for the conference, we had our members in Dubai were obviously very well connected with government, so the individuals from Israel were able to come into an undisclosed hotel and came in kind of under the radar without any issue and attend GLC Edge. But I'm bringing that up because that's a perfect example of how they figure out how to work together. And then if there have been issues in the past, they're generally resolved before it becomes an issue. Members talk to members and resolve them.
Yeah, on a sort of parallel subject, it makes me think of, I read yesterday a great story about one of the top Israeli actors is shooting a new action film in the United Arab Emirates right now. Mm-hmm. And he is so popular in the UAE, he's both Hebrew and Arab fluent, speaking both Arabic and Hebrew, that they needed bodyguards to keep autograph seekers away from him because he was such a superstar, this Israeli actor in the United Arab Emirates. And it just made me think, travel boycotts. Like, here's this Israeli actor filming in the UAE. It's like, why can't we just have common sense and get along as human beings?
Yeah. And as Ellen DeGeneres said, why can we not go back and judging people by the type of car they're driving?
There you go. If only we could judge people by the type of car that they're driving, not the character of their heart. So, Tyler,
Well, I would just have to say that I go to a lot of these industry association meetings, and oftentimes they'll have panel discussions on this, and folks like Destinations International will do them. And a lot of times there will be people representing the CVBs and DMOs in the audience from an area that is, say, has a bathroom bill or some sort of perceived discriminatory law, and they are vocal. They're advocates against those laws. Yeah. So I think it's important to point that out. And they think passing these laws in the first place is not a good business decision and doesn't reflect the values of their community, I think.
I was working in Indy when the bills came up there, and the DMO, Leonard Hoops, and his team were inspirational in their activities to turn that bill around and to communicate proactively with groups to ensure that they were on the right side of history, that they felt that they needed to do that. And certainly in North Carolina, I've worked in Raleigh and in San Antonio and other destinations in those states where they were actively engaged in turning this around. So, the DMOs are highly engaged.
And you work with DMOs and CVBs all the time, right? And I think it's fair to say that this is a huge concern of theirs.
A huge concern, and I think Indy is a really good example because when this bill came up in Indiana, and I think it was 3 years ago, does that sound right? 3 or 4 years ago, it got turned around in less than 2 weeks. And that was a dramatic shift where there was an anti-LGBT law that went on the books, and the DMO and business leaders, and this is really important, business leaders were involved and put economic clout on the table, saying that they were not going to host meetings, they were going to pull.
I think the NCAA was going to pull their Final
NCAA
Four.
From North Carolina.
That was North Carolina,
That was North
right?
Carolina.
Yeah. And it went so
Please.
well in Indianapolis with the that they brought it to Georgia and tried to pass, the same kind of Indiana bill there.
Style law
But,
there.
yeah, and it was the film industry that got it
That's
not
right.
passed
That's
there.
right.
So-
We're not going to film in
Walking
yours.
Dead.
Yep.
And a lot of times these are led by big corporations, the NFL, the NBA, and maybe even some corporations that you would not associate with being out in front of social issues that are kind of the sparks of these a lot. And I think even in the entertainment industry, especially like you mentioned, the film industry.
But there were some great articles when they were trying to pass this legislation. I remember Salesforce was one of them that said,
Yes.
we spend, thousands and thousands on meetings, and we employ a lot of people here, and, we will move, we will not meet here in
Yeah.
Atlanta, and the Atlanta meetings industry was very vocal about not wanting that law in Georgia.
Salesforce has been really interesting in this regard. Mark Benioff, the CEO, has been very public about taking their economic clout and his company's ethos of unconditional inclusion and acceptance and saying, we will not do business, or we will pull business from destinations that don't follow our thinking of unconditional acceptance. And Indiana was part of that. Benioff went very public and helped move the needle in that regard. So, I mean, you could say on the other side of this, a perceived West Coast liberal CEO is throwing his or her weight around. I mean, I could hear that argument. Yeah.
I've also heard the argument in the industry that, these destination boycotts don't work. But every time we start talking about it, we start talking about how they did work.
They did work.
And they changed the
Yep.
laws. So part of me, just as a citizen, thinks that, wow, well, maybe they do work and they affect change. But they end up hurting a lot of people that maybe work in the hospitality industry.
And they fracture society. I think Texas bathroom bill, do you have comments on, or are you up on 2017, 2018 when that law flipped? The backstory on that?
Not really. I wish I had more information about that, but not really.
I mean, I was involved working with DMOs down there and can provide some feedback, but do you guys have any? So what happened was this bill came up, and this was very specific to transgender people using the bathroom of their choice. And that bill went on the books saying, no, they can't. So they must use the bathroom of their birth gender.
So
And
similar to North Carolina.
Very similar to North Carolina. And it fractured society, and it caused consternation and a lot of attention on the tourism side. The DMOs came very strongly out against it, and it was repealed ultimately. So to Tyler, your point of, you can get on both sides of do travel boycotts work, the weaponization of travel, but we do have instances both in Indiana, North Carolina, and Texas where they did work.
And
now,
I think
it doesn't mean that that's...
And I think Arizona recognizes ML King Day,
They
too.
do now.
Yeah, so.
That goes back much further. That was early 2000s.
And I think immigration laws have also played a big issue in this, too.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's my, part of my issue with should we put this in the contract, and part of the issue is, if I'm the hotel, I'm saying, hey, I didn't pass this law,
Right.
and part of putting any kind of contract language in is, if you're a planner, of course, you can draft the perfect language, you can have great language, but you've got to get the other side to agree to put it in the contract. And if I'm a hotel, I'm thinking, I didn't pass the law. I didn't vote for the law as a citizen of this state. So they may, the hotel or the convention center or whoever it is in that state, they may or may not agree to put it in the contract. And by having a boycott, you are harming the hospitality workers of that state. So I really do have mixed feelings on the idea of destination boycotts personally, because my students, my college students, are those workers. So from a sort of a personal standpoint, I see both sides of this.
And I wonder too, we're coming into a presidential election year and election cycles, and there's such a polarization on each side of the political spectrum. Do you anticipate these issues to heat up more as politicians maybe try to make a name for themselves or drum up the support of their base by passing some of these laws?
Kathy, what do you think?
Oh, I think so. Certainly.
But you can't just say, well, we're not going to meet every 4 years. I mean, life goes on, right? I mean, and so do you have, I hate to say it, like a hit list of states that maybe don't agree with the values of the organization you're planning for, and you just avoid them? I don't know what the answer is to that. The further polarization of our society, I guess.
How could you possibly have a purple state clause, purple destination clause, where we will only meet in fully blended destinations that could honor everyone's political and moral beliefs? That would be a tough.
And we want plastic straws
and
too.
no plastic straws. Yes. Yes, indeed.
And then what are you hearing out there, Tyra? What are people putting in their contracts? I don't think there's any magic bullet, right?
There's not, unfortunately, and what I'm hearing mostly, from clients is they didn't think about this in time. So mostly what I hear is, oh no, we had this contract and we didn't think about it in time. What can we do now? And so that's why I say I'm glad that there are people that are live and that are going to listen to this and hopefully think about it ahead of time, because after the fact, it really is hard to do much of anything with it.
So understanding your attendee base, your stakeholders, ecosystem and DNA, if you will, is not always an easy thing to do, and to anticipate the unimaginable. Like, who would have thought that a bathroom bill would become rule of law? I mean, that's a little random. Maybe not.
Yeah.
But what's the next thing that?
Yeah, well, and I was sort of shrugging, David, not because of the bathroom bill, but because if it wasn't that, it was something else. Because this has been happening, this is not a recent thing, right? I mean, I can remember things that have happened, and it's not even necessarily legislation, right? It's the owner of a certain hotel donates to a certain political candidate, and so we don't want to meet at that hotel anymore.
Yeah.
It's it's a destination puts somebody on the city council who is offensive. So I've seen these things, and you guys have too. You've been in the industry as long as I have. We're a little long in the tooth, so we've been around a while. So I've seen all these things, and they do happen. So and they'll continue to happen.
This issue of political donation by rich people that own companies. Yeah. That's a really interesting new reality that we're dealing with in the U.S. and maybe outside. But what was the company 2 weeks ago that got hit for some food company or something? And Chick-fil-A is another one that's been in the news around their support for more right-wing political points of view.
Monsanto always comes up.
Monsanto,
right?
So how do you anticipate those things in our world of live events is pretty darn daunting.
And how do you poll your membership or the people who are going to this meeting to find out if it's even a hot button issue with them? I mean, is this something that you poll them, communicate with them, and then you deal with students, you deal with a lot of people who are on the younger end of running companies. Mm-hmm. Do you think that this issue will become more prominent, and that they really will hold strong to whatever they perceive their values are?
That's a possibility that I see a trend changing as our members, our younger members are coming into position as CEOs are already there. They're going to have a different mindset than some of our members who are young presidents currently are 50 and under. Well, they're phasing out into YPO Gold. And yes, the younger members are going to have a more conscious attitude, I think, in some of these.
More strident in their beliefs
Yes,
and willing
yes.
to put their money where their mouth is, I guess, in some cases, right?
But I think, too, it's our responsibility to potentially poll members, and I'm not speaking necessarily on behalf of YPO, but other organizations from a meeting professional standpoint. We should be polling members if we're going someplace that's potentially controversial.
Yeah. So I just looking at the DI toolkit, alternatives to travel bans and boycotts. So these are coming from several thousand people that responded to a poll. 73% of people said participating in discussions at the local level were favorable. Contacting state politicians, 74%. Donating to causes that advocate in that location, 69%. Organizing friends and family, 69%. Sharing opinions on social media, what a surprise. And protesting. So these are alternatives that were cited. And then working with local stakeholders to ensure policies that are considered offensive are not enforced. Interesting that taking political action, organizing, communicating, using social media are, for some people, preferable to a boycott or the weaponization. Yeah.
And I even saw, I think it was a campaign when there was maybe like a neo-Nazi march somewhere, and a group donated money for every one of the neo-Nazis that showed up and marched. So it was counterproductive to their goals in the end. So that was there's probably a lot of unique ways to be innovative about this.
Yep. So why don't we summarize from here and get closing thoughts around this issue. Again, you've got the tools from DI, destinationsinternational.org, very easy to find, all in the public domain, and you can download those tools. Eric, shall we start with you on some closing thoughts around this issue?
Yeah, I was listening to everything that's been said today, and I was thinking, actually, I had two thoughts. The first one is, that's what I have at home, and my kids see it, this quote from Martin Luther King, that the world would, I don't know exactly words, but the idea is the world would end if you become silent about things that matters.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is for each individual to speak up and for the things that they believe in. And the second thought, as an immigrant, I was thinking, yes, there's a polarization. Yes, there's a lot of debate. Yes, a lot of people are offended by whatever. And what a great country America is, that you can actually voice your opinion and debate with each other. And that is not the case necessarily everywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
So great. I love to have people that are offended that I can talk to. And that's why I love this country. So.
There you
That's
go.
nice, Eric.
From our lawyer, be prepared.
Yeah, be prepared.
Yes.
I guess my advice would indeed be prepared. Think through the issue as an organization. Take a stand. Decide if you have an issue at all and what it is. Limit it. Be prepared to negotiate on it, and understand negotiation means you're not always going to get what you want, but ask for it up front, because understand that after the fact. I have a lawyer colleague who says, if you ask for it before, it's negotiating. If you ask for it after, it's begging. That's a John Foster original. So that would be my advice.
So don't beg, ask in advance.
Yeah.
And it depends.
And it
Depends. Yeah.
Nothing's
Kathy.
black and white. To build on that, I would say really our job as the meeting professional is to guide and advise our organizations, leveraging our own expertise. And if we do decide to boycott, be sure we're prepared to take on the specific consequences, that being financial liability, et cetera, and specifically communicate that to our membership as well. And if we decide not to boycott, go through the measures as David outlined and communicate those very specifically, and even offer conversation with point counterpoint in your respective event. Use that as an opportunity along with the CSR program. And I would see with YPO, that's something we would probably do. We would offer that open dialogue on both ends.
Great.
David?
I agree with everything they've said. Use the tools that are out there. To Eric's point, in the United States, we have great privilege of being able to speak our minds. I also believe we are in a ridiculously divisive society that has created a new landscape of I'm right, you're wrong, and we have to deal with this bifurcation of these United States, and that's created a harsher landscape. So be prepared, know what's going on. When you're picking a destination, look at the political landscape so you're not surprised if something is coming down the freeway of legislative action, so you can anticipate that, to Tyra's point of don't be surprised. And use the assets that are available in the public domain from DI and other organizations to be educated and to communicate around these issues.
Well, great. Thank you all. Weren't they wonderful? Let's give them a round of applause. Huh?
So any questions from the group before we break, even off camera?
And
Hearing none.
I'll take this opportunity to thank everyone out there in viewer land for joining us for this on-location broadcast from IMEX America in Las Vegas 2019. Make sure to check us out on meetingstoday.com, where we have plenty of participation over the years from all the folks on our panel here. And then finally, thank you to our sponsor, Meet AC, Atlantic City, and stay tuned right after the end of the broadcast for a quick message from them. Thank you. We're here with Joan Mooney, Director of Sales with Meet AC. Thanks for joining us, Joan.
Thank you so much.
And thank you guys so much for sponsoring our on-location broadcast.
Thank you. You're welcome.
So tell everyone what's new in Atlantic City these days.
Well, Atlantic City is doing great. We're undergoing a full revitalization of the city with millions of dollars of investment coming into the city. We now have over 17,000 hotel rooms, 1.8 million square feet of meeting and exhibit space citywide, and a whole array of amenities that planners and attendees will love.
Wonderful, and there's plenty of hotel news too recently.
Yes, in the past 18 months, the city has grown tremendously. We had 2 casinos open up, Hard Rock Casino and Ocean Casino, and that has added 3,500 rooms to our inventory. We have some other investments that came in. Stockton University. Stockton University has a beach campus and it currently enrolls 1,800 students. And we had a developer come in and is revitalizing 3 of our city streets and making it an area for restaurants, cafes, hotels, etc. It's coined after the Monopoly game, so it is Tennessee Avenue, St. James Place, and New York Avenue. First phase is complete, and we're looking forward to the finished product.
And I hear there's some big LEED certification news at the convention center also.
Yes, we're super excited. We just were awarded the gold LEED certification, and which puts us in quite a list of venues that have this distinction. 3 of the things that really we were able to get this certification. We have 13,000 solar panels on our rooftop. We just completed a lighting project at the convention center with LED lighting throughout the exhibit halls. And more recently, the bathroom renovation project is complete, and that was about a $9.1 million renovation.
Wow.
So we're continuing to put money back into the convention center.
Great, and then I hear you have an incentive program for planners also.
We do. Our incentive program has been in place for the past few years, and it's been very successful. And basically, it's just to attract new business coming into the city. So if you have a meeting in the future, we would love to talk to you about that. Who meets the requirements at the conclusion of the meeting, we will write you a check to help offset any costs incurred for the meeting.
That's wonderful. Well, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for sponsoring the program today.
You're welcome.
And thank you for joining us for this program.
Thank you so much.
And we'll go ahead over to meetingstoday.com. You can check this out again if you want, and a full range of other webinars and broadcasts. Have a great rest of the day.